That's my secret, cat. I'm always angry.
Alright. I ran out of patience. On the roost!
Hey everyone, Captain, big fan of Spider-Man.
Avengers! Assemble. Hello, Peter.
Hello and welcome to the Infinity Saga and Beyond MCU Fan Podcast. My name is Jordan Wiegand, and with me today is Jack Sewpersaud. How are you?
Hello, doing well. Wrapped up classes, still have just final assignments to go, but it's almost summer for me, so that's great.
Any final exams, or are they just all assignments?
All assignments, and it's actually only
That's
one left. So, but it is a 20-page paper.
Oh wow!
So, yeah.
Good luck with that. How many pages are done?
Technically 20 pages are done, but it all needs to be revised, and about 8 pages need to be completely rewritten. So
that's not bad then. Knock that out in an hour.
I wish I could say that was about an hour. But do you know what does take an hour? Watching episode 5 of Moon Knight.
Good segue. Episode 5, Asylum, directed by Mohamed Diab, written by Rebecca Kirsch and Matthew Orton, aired April 27th, 2022 on Disney+. The synopsis officially here is Marc and Steven search through their memories to find their truth or become left behind. What's your initial thoughts on this episode, and I guess episode 4, since you weren't on that episode?
They were both great, and I see why reviewers who had gotten those episodes in advance were saying why they were the best ones. I really think this show, depending on how episode 6 goes, has the potential to be my favorite of the MCU shows. I mean, it's about equal with Hawkeye and Falcon and the Winter Soldier right now, which were my top 2. So it's very close to being up there. And I have a feeling that episode 6 is going to put it over the edge. But they were both great episodes, really good cinematography, really good use of mirrors, like we've been seeing throughout every episode. And yeah, great stuff in both of them.
Yeah, episode 5 here I thought was really good. Probably the best one so far. This kind of reminded me of WandaVision episode 8, where they kind of go through her memories. This is the way I think you should kind of do these episodes. Being able to see the moments in their lives, and the way we saw it with Wanda, the way we saw it here, some sort of excuse to have them come to terms with stuff that, especially for Steven, for Marc, this really forces him to take a look at stuff that he's been actively blocking out. It is the cause of Steven even existing, right? Are these memories, and him having to actually come to terms with it and not be able to run away from it. Because if he needs to save Layla, if he needs to stop Harrow, he needs to face this stuff head on to actually have a chance of getting back. So when you put it like that, when you put it in those type of situations, it makes it work better because the characters cannot run from it. The characters have to sit with it. And then that means we get to sit with it. It's not like just, here's a flashback for flashback's sake. It's serving a story purpose as well. So let's get into it. We start out with kind of where we left off. Taweret, if that's how you say it. I'm not really sure how to pronounce this. I've heard them say it a million times in this episode.
I think that's about right. It sounds correct. That phonetically it looks right. I feel like I might have heard it Taweret or something like that.
Yeah, it was like, especially the way Steven would say it, I think was different than the way Marc would say it. I don't know. It was
maybe it's just the English accent.
Yeah. But she explains to Marc and Steven that they are dead and that the hospital is actually inside a boat sailing through the Duat. And the end destination is where they're going to have their scales of justice, right?
The
Determine
gates of
whether they should
Osiris.
enter, to see if they should enter the field of reeds or not. And I like it here too. She mentions that about the ancestral plane from Black Panther, and we get a mention of that, and a mention of like how oh, you should see that one. That one's so beautiful. And it's nice to know that all of these things like actually exist, right? Like, for however it works, there's these multiple afterlives in the MCU, and the fact that she has acknowledged the ancestral plane, that means we know that when a character goes there, it is a real thing they're going to. It's not some sort of death trick that's playing on your mind when you're dying, the way that like flashing before your life is kind of. So I thought that was very interesting, and I was happy to hear a Black Panther reference in this, that they both take place in Africa.
Yeah, it was pretty cool to see. And I also I believe Bast and Sekhmet, who T'Challa mentions in Captain America Civil War, are both like Egyptian, or like at least it mentioned in the same like sort of mythos of like Egyptian deities. So I think that that's pretty interesting that it's all connected, and they're showing that. I also think it's smart that Marvel is avoiding controversy by not denoting a single afterlife, and they're being a little smart there on that. I think trying to make sure not to make anyone upset. But
you kind of have to that way, right? Because you have Khonshu as an Egyptian god, so we know that those exist, right?
Yep.
We have Thor, who's a Norse god, right? So you have already just characters themselves that kind of clash with the religions, that you have to kind of make sense of it all. So I'm not sure how it works that he ends up in kind of the Egyptian afterlife, since he's not really Egyptian. He's Jewish.
Yeah.
But I think that is just very interesting, especially with the history between Egypt and Jews themselves, right? Like when you talk about how they faced persecution there and had to leave Egypt. So there's kind of like just multiple layers to a lot of this stuff, even if they don't explore it like 100%. Like, some of that stuff is there and interesting. I'm assuming maybe because he died in Egypt, he's there. I'm not really sure. But anyway, we get to see some memories. Steven is going to walk in and actually get to see a memory of his mother. So we now recognize that. I'm not sure how this would work. I'm not sure how it works with regular dissociative identity disorder systems, where do they all recognize the mother as their mother, or is it, how that works? Because he does recognize this as his mom, Steven, though it is Mark's mom, right? So curious to see how that. I didn't research that. That's probably something I should have looked into.
I did. So I was on TikTok yesterday, and I saw someone who has DID talking about how that kind of works, and mentioning that it's not necessarily two like individuals, it's like a fractured personality, right? So they would technically remember some of the same things like before that, but they have their own, each alter, fracture, whatever you want to call it, has a different moral compass, a different like view on things. So it is slightly different, but I think that based off of what I heard about it, it matches up with how it is portrayed in real life, which makes sense because I'm pretty sure they have a consultant for that on the show.
So how's that work then? Like, so if this person watched, if the person with DID, if they watched Moon Knight with one of their alters, does the other alter remember that and is able to talk on how it's portrayed, or do they have to rewatch it? Like, that's something I'm curious about.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I gave that person a follow on TikTok. I remember because I was interested in seeing more about it. Uh,
Yeah,
I might have to go back and check and then come back on a later episode and
because sometimes they
and
can't control when they split, right? They
right,
can't
yeah,
really. So like that could be that could be something that you're like, if you're watching a TV show, and this is little things. This is not like big problems that people with DID have to worry about, right? This is like a little problem I'm thinking about as
yeah,
somebody that watches TV all the time. Do I have to restart it then? You know, like, or like if I split during it, do I have to go back and rewatch the episode? You know, little stuff like that. Like, I wonder how like just day to day life works in that type of stuff. Because in this show, it's also
yeah.
portrayed Steven doesn't remember everything Mark does, right? So I
Right.
would think that they would almost have to watch it like however many personalities they have. If they all had the same interest, they all have to watch it, right? Like that seems like that would be a little overwhelming with how much time that would take.
Yeah, I I would love to see like Marvel or Disney put out like a mini like documentary type thing on that kind
Mm-hmm.
of thing where like they talk with the consultant from the show about all this stuff because I think that would be really cool because it's an opportunity for them to like, you know, raise education on this
Right.
because before this like nobody had like any like nobody really was that interested in like figuring out all the details of it and all of that.
I mean,
So
yeah. I
they
mean,
have an opportunity to educate a lot of people.
most people still call it multiple personality, right? When it's
Yeah.
been changed to dissociative identity.
Yeah.
So,
So,
yeah.
Disney/Marvel has a real opportunity to educate a lot of people, which could be awesome.
Yeah, they'll release the Avengers like the Marvel Studios Assembled thing, but I'm not sure that'll go in as depth as we want for some of this, I think. So
Yeah.
he sees his mother here, right? And we actually get the line of the later skaters here that Steven says all the time. It's actually coming from Mark and his mother saying it to each other. But
Hmm.
his young brother Randall and him are going to go while they're going to go out and explore. It's going to start raining. They go into a cave and Randall's going to drown. That's going to cause his mother to blame Mark for it. And so some dark themes here because then the mom starts to become withdrawn. We see that in birthday parties. She doesn't want to come down, right? She's becoming withdrawn, and then this kind of starts causing his dissociative identity disorder because she starts beating him, which was a dark theme here for this show. Now, I like the way they handled it better in this. In the comics, there's a different cause for his dissociative identity disorder. So if people don't know
Yep.
the way it works in the comics, his father is a rabbi in Chicago. And he was a rabbi who was as a child managed to escape Nazi prosecution after Hitler invaded Czechoslovakia. So we're not sure if his dad is a rabbi in this. They are Jewish still, but not sure if he's a rabbi. He's definitely not old enough to escape the Nazis, right? Like this is one of those things where a comic rolling time frame can work pretty well with that, but when it comes to like whenever they introduce the X-Men, I doubt Magneto is going to be a survivor of the Holocaust because that is something that is at this point would push Magneto like 80 years old, 90 years old, right? Like it's going to be a little too old at a certain point. But then during the last years of his childhood, Mark discovers that his close family friend, who is a rabbi, was in reality a Nazi deserter and secretly a serial killer of Jews. So Mark's fighting instinct, as it says on Wikipedia, kicked off for the first time when he fended off against this guy, and the guy later disappeared without a trace, and this is what caused Mark to develop a dissociative identity disorder. So kind of like he walks into the basement and sees this guy killing Jews, which can be haunting, I'm sure, but it's not as personal, I guess. Well, it's a family friend. I thought it was better having it be a link with the mother, a mother we've been introduced to in the first episode when he's hauling his mom as Steven. And, you know, when Layla mentions, oh, so you're talking to her again, you know, when she's talking to Steven, but she thinks she's talking to Mark. So just something that I felt like has built up to a reveal that I think paid off here.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I do remember seeing some people like saying, "Oh, why did they change that?" Because, you know, they kind of saw it as like, you know, like erasing part of like Mark's background as being Jewish. But at the same time, I was like, it wouldn't really make a ton of sense timeline wise. Like, even if like this happens when he's a kid, if you're assuming he's 40 now, that puts him at, you know, being a kid in what, the 80s, right?
80s, yeah.
Yeah. And then, you know, I guess like it could be like 65, the family friend, and it would kind of work, but it's still starting to push it a little bit, especially since his dad presumably would be, you know, like 30, 40 at the time when he's a kid. So yeah, I don't know. I think you could potentially make it work timeline wise, but it would be a lot messier. And I think the way they made it for this makes sense. So I don't have an issue with it. I mean, I have an issue with what the mother's doing, obviously, but I don't have an issue with them changing.
Oh, you're not for that?
No, not really.
My whole thing with this thing is when you read the synopsis of how this happens and everything, it just reads really cartoonish. It really does. Evil Nazi deserter just killing, you know, Jews in the basement, like that kind of thing seems just over the top a bit, that I can't take it that seriously. When it's this, you take it more seriously. It hurts you a little bit more. It's his own mom who is, you know, causing this pain because of the loss of one of her children, and she's holding that against a child who was ultimately innocent, but he's going to sit there and think until Steven tells him it wasn't his fault, right? That it was his fault. They're kids, you know, he can't control what happened. Maybe they should have turned around. He's the older brother, but you can't kind of do that thing to your kid, you know, like blaming him and then actually taking it to a physical level. It's emotional abuse at first, and then it takes to a physical level after that.
Yeah.
We get to see the cool flashback of Mark actually agreeing to become Khonshu's like fist of justice, which I thought was really great to see here. And he mentions his partner Bushman. And this is a character who's a villain in Moon Knight comics. His first appearance was Moon Knight #1 in 1980. His name was Raoul Bushman. He was born in a small African nation, and his family was driven off by European entrepreneurs. So he turns to violence and operates as a mercenary. We're not sure if that's how this happened in this, but just like this is where the name comes from. He's a swordsman, a marksman, and an unarmed combatant. He has experience in guerrilla warfare and battle tactics, and in this, he took it too far, and he ended up killing Layla's father. In the comics, I think he had killed Randall Specter in one of the things. So I think they kind of fused that a little bit. So he killed Mark's brother in one of the comics. But, just a fun little nugget, I guess.
Yeah, and actually, speaking of that, since you mentioned Moon Knight, the 1980 one, at 12 minutes and let me make sure I got this, 12 minutes and 4 seconds about in this episode, there is a QR code that appears. That QR code, if you scan it, will give you a downloadable like digital copy of Moon Knight #1 from 1980. So
they gave us a different one this time.
yes. So that is, it's the QR code itself says floor map. It happens at about literally at exactly 12 minutes, but it's there. You can scan it and get a free comic.
I'm gonna do that right now while we're doing this. But 12 minutes in. All right.
Yep.
Awesome. Hold on. Let me get to 12 minutes. I just want to see what happens when I actually do it.
I have to say I didn't find this one for myself. I I got it from TikTok. I feel like I've said that already 5 times this episode, but
it happens all the time, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, come on. I watch these episodes sometimes at 2 a.m. or 8 a.m. when I wake up before classes usually. I don't catch every detail like that.
Oh, yeah, there you go. You can read it. It takes you to marvel.com, gives you the comic. You can just scan it and do whatever there. It's pretty cool.
There you go. Yeah. So if you're interested in seeing that origin, because I believe that is the issue where, the whole situation with Mark, killing the archaeologist and becoming, Khonshu's avatar all comes into play. I believe that's the one. So if you're interested in seeing how that compares, and it is pretty much a faithful recreation of it. So yeah.
Yeah, what I also recommend is, if you're getting into comics at all, if you're, loving these shows and you want to know more stuff like this or read some more stuff like this, don't just wait for the free QR code with the comic. I'd say sign up for Marvel Unlimited. And if you're okay with reading comics digitally, that's one way to do it. And then Amazon Prime now has where you can sign up and read some. If you have Amazon Prime, you can actually read some comics through there as well, because Prime has bought Comixology. So you can they have some free comics for you to read with a Prime subscription. Marvel, DC, Image Comics, all kinds of different companies and comics. But yeah, definitely something that is worth it. I have both DC Universe Infinite and the Marvel Unlimited. Well worth it. And then plus now I go to the comic shop and get comics every week. So it's a money pit. But so we have Marc and Steven who are convincing Taweret to let them return to the living world to stop Harrow. And she's going to start steering the boat towards the gates of Osiris. Now we can go back to Dr. Harrow, right, as the doctor. And he's trying to convince Marc that he has to fully open up to Steve. And this is when we kind of learn about the mother abuse thing. Steven and Marc reconcile with each other, but the scales fail to balance, which starts causing the spirits to attack them. And while they are saving themselves, Steve is knocked off the edge of the boat and into the duat and consumed, and is no more. And then the scales are finally balanced, and Marc finds himself in the field of reeds. It's kind of where it ends. But what I want to say with this is something that we kind of alluded to, something that was alluded to in the first episode of the show that has kind of come back around with this and really shows how well they've been planning some of this stuff. But we get the little girl in the museum in episode 1 asked Steven, did it suck for you? And he was like, what are you talking about? And she said, to be denied to the field of reeds. And he said, well, I'm not dead. Right. And this is kind of a foreshadowing of the death of Steven here, as Steven isn't the one that makes it to the Field of Reeds. It's Marc. So who is this little girl, Jack? What, any theories on why she knows this or anything like that?
No clue. I think she's just I think she might just be a bored kid at a museum who didn't ask to be taught stuff, and so she was just sick of it, and she's just like, yeah, but you're dead, aren't you? And like a comeback, after being lectured at about Egyptian afterlife. That's my theory. That's the best I've got this time. Nothing crazy.
See, I'm thinking maybe she was I don't know. I'm not sure if the way she said it was so creepy almost when I rewatch it. So I'm thinking maybe she was possessed or something. I don't know. I don't know if we'll get the answer to that, but
probably
it's
not.
a nice foreshadowing.
That's probably not being answered. There's too many other things to answer in episode 6.
Let's skip to that. We got 42 minutes left of the show, allegedly. The guy who's usually leaks the episode lengths for all the Disney Plus shows, I think, and he says 42 minutes. This has caused some meltdowns on Twitter, Jack. We have people complaining already that this show is going to have a Hawkeye or WandaVision-esque finale, which, to be honest, I thought those finales were great, so I'm not sure what the downside of that is. But people saying it's going to be rushed, that they're not going to answer everything. They don't have enough time. I just don't know what else there is to answer. This is what we got, right? We have, and the way people kind of word this stuff is like, they'll word like 10 things that are actually like 2 things, right? But all we need is Marc to be revived, the freeing of Khonshu, and then defeating Harrow. That's easily done in 42 minutes. But then people will say, well, we also need Layla and Mark's relationship resolved, and we need to see Jake Lockley. That kind of stuff, Jake Lockley can be a post-credit scene. The relationship with Layla, I'm sure that'll be covered up once he is awake and is able to save her and free Khonshu or whatever they got to do together. Like, this stuff shouldn't take longer than the 42 minutes in my mind.
Yeah, and also, people who are like, not everything will be resolved in those 42 minutes. Marvel doesn't resolve everything in one show or movie for a reason. It's why they've been so successful. Having open-ended things at the end of like each individual project is what keeps the universe moving along. Like, imagine if at the end of I don't know, the Avengers, they answered everything about what Thanos was doing and what his plan was. Why? What would be the point then? Right. There would be no reason for you to watch the rest of the 6 years of Marvel movies, because it's like, oh, we already know what he's going to do. So you all you need at that point is the end of Infinity War and Endgame, and that's it. Like, the reason why things are left open-ended is so they can continue in later projects. That's why if you thought WandaVision had an unsatisfying finale, you were probably expecting them to wrap up everything, but that's not how Marvel works. They literally they
resolved the main plot. They resolved
exactly.
the main plot. The main plot of WandaVision was Wanda creating Westview
to deal with her grief.
Deal with her grief. She overcomes that. She exiles herself, and it sets up for Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, right? Like, this plot line here is stopping Amit and stopping Harrow.
Yes.
The character itself will not be wrapped up. Marc is still going to have problems, and I'm sure that's going to be hinted in an end credit scene, which we haven't gotten yet at all this season, which is kind of refreshing. But if we get a Jake Lockley reference, cool. Oscar Isaac said we're going to find out who's in that sarcophagus. So it definitely seems like there's going to be a reveal there. But if anything, that sets up his journey for another story. He came to terms with Steven in this one. He is going to stop Harrow and Amit And then we can leave the Layla thread. We can leave the Lockley thread. We can leave that stuff for a Moon Knight film, Moon Knight season 2, Werewolf by Night, where he's supposed to appear, right? Like, so we have these things that are still, the character itself is not wrapped up. Like,
Yeah.
the main plot line is wrapped up. It's like saying, why didn't Harry Potter kill Voldemort in the first book? His issue there was the Sorcerer's Stone and Professor Quirrell. It becomes a bigger it's a thread that goes throughout all 7 books. The first book is wrapping up that first thing, and that's kind of what this is wrapping up the Amit Harrow stuff, and we'll get more of it later.
Yeah, people need to calm down a little bit on this. Movies would, like, especially in bigger universes, would not be as entertaining if they wrapped up everything in the first one. Like Star Wars, if they defeated Darth Vader in A New Hope, and they defeated the entire Empire in A New Hope, then there's no Empire Strikes Back. There's no Return of the Jedi. Like, you can wrap up the individual story thread without having to keep going to completely wrap up everything. And I understand that some people, especially like for the WandaVision one, and one of my theories for why people, I have 2 really for why people said that ending was unsatisfying. One was over theorizing. People went way too big with their predictions and built up this dream thing in their head, and when it didn't come true, they said it was a failure, even though like it was still perfectly good. It's just that people over theorized and killed it for themselves. The other one is WandaVision brought in a lot of new MCU fans, a lot of people who hadn't seen a lot of the other movies, because it was a big cultural phenomenon at the time, right? The internet like exploded every time a new episode came up. It was a big thing that so it brought in a lot of new people. So people were confused when this series didn't wrap itself up. And I think that's the same case with Moon Knight.
And
that
when they said they wouldn't have a second season, people are like, what?
Yeah. But I think that's the same case with Moon Knight here, where, a lot of people who aren't as big into the wider MCU, right, are coming in to watch Moon Knight because they've heard, it's not connected to the rest of the universe yet. Like, there's references, but you don't need those to understand the entirety of it. But it's not, it exists on its own. You don't need context from other movies to understand it. And, that's like why my cousin's gotten into this show, because he's like, yeah, I don't watch the rest of the MCU, but this stands on its own and I can enjoy that. And so I think a lot of other people are coming in now and they're like, oh, story's not going to wrap up in 42 minutes. They can't wrap up the entire character, when that's not the point. So that could be part of it as well. I think that could be part of it. But for people who are just watching the MCU, they're missing the point of the MCU as a whole, I think, which is, a bit strange.
Yeah, I look at it like how you mentioned A New Hope. Most of the MCU films and shows are like A New Hope. What I mean by that is fairly standalone. You could watch it without seeing the other stuff. But now that there's the prequels, some of those references to like the Clone Wars, right? When Obi-Wan mentions that. When you first watch, if you just watch episode 4, A New Hope, you're like, oh, that's cool. It's like some history here. You can go watch the history then. You can go back and watch the Clone Wars. You can watch Attack of the Clones, Revenge of the Sith. But the story wrapped up at the end of A New Hope that if it wasn't successful, you could theoretically say, oh, that was a good story. Right? But there's still these threads of, well, we still have the Darth Vader thread, right? He survived there. So when it was successful, they were able to make Empire Strikes Back. Empire Strikes Back is like Infinity War, or vice versa. Infinity War is like, Empire Strikes Back, where it ends on a cliffhanger. Most of these MCU films do not end on a cliffhanger. They usually mostly resolve the plot, but the characters can still move forward into another film. Endgame was kind of like Return of the Jedi, where you have a victory, but yet the characters can still go forward, and we see that with 7, 8, 9, right? So
Yeah.
if you want to take the original trilogy and kind of show how it, and you know, Kevin Feige is a huge Star Wars fan, so you can kind of see how he builds it, almost the same way that, like, guess what? If Eternals, I like Eternals, some people didn't. If it's not going to warrant a sequel, there's those threads that are out there, but the main plot of Eternals is done, and they can move those characters into a different film. Like, that's kind of the luxury that the Marvel Cinematic Universe has right now, is if something's not so for this, they'll have Moon Knight, the plot will wrap up, and if it's successful, it'll get a season 2. If not, if it's really successful, they might get a movie. If it's successful but not enough successful, or not successful, they could just move Moon Knight into a different thing. That's the luxury they have of like Incredible Hulk. They haven't been able to make a new Hulk film because of the NBC having the Universal having the rights to distribute. So what did they do? They threw him in Ragnarok. Like, they're able to kind of juggle these things of, well, if this doesn't work, we can throw this in here. We can shift this franchise here. We did Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Oh, that was a huge hit. Well, now Captain America gets a 4th film, and it's Sam Wilson. Like, they're able to kind of just play with house money at this point because they've been so successful. And if something isn't as successful, they can say, you know what, let's restructure this. We'll keep the actor, we'll keep the character, but maybe we mesh them in with something else. And that's kind of what they're able to do right now. And that's exciting.
Yeah, I will say, I think that a post-credit scene is going to reveal a season 2 for Moon Knight. I think it will. They, like, I know a lot of people have been like, oh, but Marvel says it's a limited series, and that's what like the speculation has been. Marvel can change their plans. Yes, they probably have things like character threads laid out, but that doesn't mean that if something is going to make them money, they're not going to go for it. I mean, do you think they planned out the Agatha Harkness
No.
like
TV
TV show? No, exactly. Like they can do that kind of stuff.
The song
like,
was popular.
Exactly. Like that. I think that we could see a season 2, especially since we don't know exactly where Moon Knight fits in next. Like for like Hawkeye, we can kind of guess where those characters fit in next. We can kind of guess kind of places where they can fit in. WandaVision, we know, new Doctor Strange, and then I think is it Secret Wars or
Secret Invasion.
Secret Invasion. I mix those up all the time. That's supposedly where this new version of Vision is going to show up again.
And the Marvels are tying in with that.
Exactly. So all of these things, like we know where they are, but Moon Knight, they could easily go, yeah, here's season 2. Same with Loki. That's why they were able to make a season 2 out of it, because Loki doesn't technically exist in a time anymore. He exists in a place without time. So, you could do whatever you want with that, really. Like, if you wanted to make a movie about it, you could, but it's a season 2. So, I mean, either way,
yeah, Loki's the only
I think it'll happen.
Loki's really the only thing that hasn't wrapped up, but they had known ahead of time that they were going to make a season 2, supposedly. So,
okay,
that I think is a little easier. This, I don't think they can announce a season 2 for this. From what I read with the whole Emmy thing, is you can only make it a limited series if you had no plans for a second season at the time of airing or producing. I don't know. So I'm not sure if they can physically announce it during the show. They might have to wait until the Emmys are done and then they can renew it. I would assume is how they might have to walk with that one. Because there are shows that have been a limited series that have gotten, I think, Emmy noms. Like, I think the original American Horror Story or whatever. Like, some of these shows that were just originally going to be one season and then they were popular and are like, oh, we'll make an anthology like Fargo or something. Like, they're able to do it like that. So I'm not sure how that'll work. I could be wrong. That's what I've read online. So, the internet's never wrong, right? Especially Twitter now, right? No, I'm
Oh
just
yeah.
kidding. But so that's something to kind of keep an eye out for if you don't get a second season announcement. The rumor is he's going to show up in Werewolf by Night, which is a Halloween special we've talked about on here a few times. So that would be cool if that's the case. He can easily show up in Blade. I would not be surprised if he showed up in Blade, the movie. And 42 minutes, by the way, let's just say broadcast television has lived with producing 42-minute shows for a long time. You can fit a lot of stuff in 42 minutes. I've been rewatching Breaking Bad. Their shows sometimes go up to 47. You can fit a lot of stuff in 42 to 47 minutes. Like, the rule of television is you can knock out a lot of stuff. When people are listing things that they're like, oh, they have to revive Mark and they have to free Khonshu, that's probably happening like boom, boom, right? That's probably not like, oh, now we have to climb the temple and get to Khonshu, and then we have to, like, it's probably going to be bang, bang. All right, now I'm back to being your fist, and I have to defeat Harrow, and that could be done in 5 to 6 minutes. That leaves you with 30-some minutes of the rest of the show.
Yeah. People need to remember that this isn't like the entire third act of a Marvel film. Like it's like 2/3 of the third act. Like the third act started like about almost at the end of episode 5, right? Where where they start to turn the ship around, and then they're fighting off all of these monsters. That's where this starts to kick off. And now we're coming towards the conclusion of that. It's even then, like a third act in most Marvel movies is still like, think about like Ant-Man, right? The first Ant-Man. That's like 30-35 minutes. They wrap that up, and that fight takes like 25 minutes of it. Like the actual heist part is like 5 minutes of that. So I think it'll be fine. People need to stop overreacting with it, because they're gonna wrap it up fine, and they're gonna wrap up the main story thread. There might still be some things that are unresolved. There's even a possibility we don't get Jake Lockley. Oh no.
Yeah.
It'll be fine. It'll be fine. Trust me. It'll be fine. I'm half expecting that sarcophagus, if we find out who's inside of it, to be another Steven. I'm half expecting it. I'm keeping
Steven
that
too.
in the back. Yeah. because you read
So is Steven really gone, or
I don't
because
think
like that's
so.
not the way dissociative identity disorder works. So I
No.
mean, like technically, Mark can probably he'll feel that loss, but if Steven's needed again at some point, I'm sure he can come back.
Yeah,
Like
he
it's part of his personality. It's
he
a different thing.
I'd also say when Steven goes off, his heart doesn't disappear, does it?
Exactly. It's still on the scale.
His heart is still there, which implies that he is still around. Because I think that he is still around. He's still going to be there. Because in the comics, Mark loses alters from time to time, and usually they come back. Because
Before, they used to never even be alters. They used to just be disguises he would do. Before they made it dissociative identity disorder. Yeah.
Yeah, like Steven is going to come back. I'm almost certain of it. It might not be at the end of this series.
Yeah.
But I have a feeling he is not gone forever, because that just wouldn't make sense for how it works. And also, this is like in the afterlife. It's in some other place other than reality, really.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that I think that he can come back. I think that he can come back.
I think so too. I think it'll be interesting. I think Mark will think he's gone, and then I think if you're gonna do like a Jake tease, it's like he thinks, okay, I'm whole again. I don't have Steven. I have had this figured out now. And then boom, Jake appears, right? As like a little tease of like, oh, I thought I had this all figured out, but now I don't. Now there's this other thing. And can I just also want to cut out the complaining again about people saying like, well, in the press releases and well, not the press release, but in the press junkets, they've been saying it's 6 hours long. We're only at 4 hours and 30 some minutes. Like what that means, 6 hours means 6 episodes. That's what they mean. That is just a regular TV term that has been around for a while. It's just I don't know what the right word is for it, but it's just like a term. It doesn't mean 6 physical hours. It means 6 hours of television, which goes back to broadcast days of an hour being the length of the episode, but with commercials, it comes down to the 42, 43 minutes. So that's kind of what that means. It just is just like a term that has jumped to streaming now because the people that make streaming shows are the people that make regular shows. So they use the same industry terms. Like I remember when Lost was on TV, I'm pretty sure that the creators have said, well, we got like 16 hours to work with. And they're talking about 16 episodes. It's just a term that happens. And people take this too literally. And I saw this with WandaVision. I saw this with Falcon Winter Soldier, where they're like, well, if you take this, they said it was 6 hours, but it's actually coming out to 5 and 20 minutes or 4 hours and 34 minutes. Why is the Falcon Winter Soldier missing an hour and a half? It's not. It's 6 episodes. Just an industry term.
People are really good at getting mad about things that they don't need to, that they never would have gotten mad about had the internet not existed. The internet's great
stuff
for
they don't even understand is what it is.
The internet's great for a lot of things. It's great for a lot of things. It's great for information. It's great for like social stuff sometimes. What it is not good for is for people being able to broadcast completely uninformed opinions into the world and have them be spread as fact. That is what it is not good for, because that happens all the time. And it's annoying. I'm just going to say it's annoying.
It is. No,
it's a little annoying.
Well, everybody thinks they're an expert on stuff. They take stuff too literally. Like this, for example, with the industry terms. It just is what it is. It's just, I understand, like, you're probably frustrated that they use those terms then because it seems misleading, but it's just a industry term. It's just something they've used since TV has been around. So, all right, what's to come on the podcast? A little bit of news here. First, we had some MCU news that I wanted to get out of the way here. Is Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania is switching dates with the Marvels. So Ant-Man and the Wasp now comes out February 17th of 2023, less than a year away. That's also the original date it was given. So then it got moved and then it got moved back. It was originally February, got pushed to July when they moved everything due to the scheduling issues, or when Letitia Wright got injured, or whenever they moved all that stuff with CGI and all that got I think when they pushed like Doctor Strange from March to May and they moved everything, that got bumped. It's now going back to February 17th. The Marvels is coming out July 28th, 2023 then. So it switched dates. With that, the Marvels is the Captain Marvel spinoff. It's called that because Miss Marvel's in it, Captain Marvel in it, and then we're also getting Monica Rambeau in it as well. So, Jack, as our resident Ant-Man fan here, what was your thoughts on getting Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania earlier than expected?
It's great because, this next year is just fantastic for me because I get to see Doctor Strange in 5 days. I'm seeing it on Thursday, the first time my theater had available, because I'm not risking any chance of spoilers. I don't care how I'm proctoring an AP exam on Friday, and I am very worried. I'm very worried that it would get spoiled if I didn't see it on that Thursday. So there we go. There's that. And then in like only 10 months, I get to see my second favorite superhero. Ant-Man, and that is fantastic. And it's going to be really exciting because everything that we've heard about it seems like it seems like it's going to be almost like the Avengers, how the Avengers was for phase 1. It seems like Ant-Man Quantumania is going to be for phase 4, in that it sets up a big bad for the foreseeable future in the MCU. So yeah, I'm very excited for it. And plus,
I'm
it's Paul
excited
Rudd.
for it because of Kang. Like getting Kang earlier for me is better. Like we don't really know what the Marvels is about yet. We don't know the villain, right? We don't know any of that. So just kind of setting that aside and knowing that we're getting Kang and we might get some young Avengers. I don't know, but because we're getting Cassie. So that's what I'm really looking forward to, because loving Kang, it looks like maybe Loki season 2 would either be out right before or right after Ant-Man. So we'll get more Kang in that, I'm assuming, as well, with Jonathan Majors. So that's what I'm really excited for. I want to see what his role is in this. It seems to be more big MCU stuff in this movie than what the Ant-Man films usually are. And the Marvels might have that too with the Secret Invasion stuff, but we just don't know yet. So I'm not getting my hopes up on like what that movie's about yet. So just getting Kang first, as Kang is one of my favorite villains in Marvel. So that would be a lot of fun, because anything with time travel is a plus for me, because my favorite films are the Back to the Future films. And that has just shaped my life, that anything with time travel is awesome in my book.
See, that would explain why I liked Moon Knight episode so much, because my favorite movie franchise besides, MCU, is the Indiana Jones films. So, episode 4 of Moon Knight, great, absolutely fantastic, because it felt like Indiana Jones. This most recent episode, not quite, but it was still very good. I did cry during the episode as well. I know a lot of other people did as well. And I did want to mention one other thing about it that I'd thought about, because I remember seeing a lot of people worried about Moon Knight before it came out, about how it would deal with Mark being Jewish, right? Because when Wanda was introduced into the MCU, in the comics, she is, I believe she's Jewish as well. So having her go to actually not essentially, yes, the Nazis. She went to work for Nazis. Didn't seem to make a ton of sense to some people, and kind of erasing some of that. People weren't happy. So when Moon Knight was announced, people were like, "Oh no, what's going to happen?" But I think, and based off of what I've seen from other people, they've actually presented it well. They've shown his identity as a Jewish man without having to do anything huge about it, but they're showing how it does intersect with his backstory, how it does really work there. So I think that's very cool that's how that works.
Yeah, I saw some complaints online about it, about how Oscar's not Jewish and all that kind of stuff. But I'm just always of you take the best actor you can get for it. And with the Scarlet Witch stuff, from my memories of her in the comics, I don't think she's ever like a huge Jewish is like the cornerstone of her character. So they kind of adapted and made something a little different. I guess the biggest thing I would think of her, I might just be wrong, because I know sometimes they've kind of, they always switch this stuff around, right? Like at one point she was Magneto's daughter. Now that's kind of been retconned. They retcon stuff left and right that I don't even know if she's currently Jewish in the comics. I have no idea what because I know sometimes she's like a Romanian, but sometimes she's not. So I don't know.
I still think
but
I still think it is cool that they built in representation that works
yeah.
well. That's the thing that because with so many
Yeah,
people
not
being
like
worried about how it would be presented, right? Like that.
yeah, it's always better doing it that way than being like, "You are Jewish, Mark. Don't you know that?" Like, I mean, like
Yeah.
when you can just, show the yarmulke, show that kind of stuff on references to it and dialogue without just beating it over the head of being like the way some screenwriters would probably say it of like in this Jewish household, Mark, we do not do that. Like,
Yeah.
you know,
They
being able to kind of interpret it and say
they did a
show it as
good
it's
job
said
of
that way.
showing, not telling. That's what I was about to say. They did a good job of showing and not telling. That's good. They did use the term, oh god, I don't want to say the actual term because I'm worried I'll get it wrong. But the period of like 1 week of mourning after like a
Yes, yeah.
funeral. But they did use the term for that, which is good. And I think I actually we skipped over this in the episode recap. That moment when like Mark sees his dad in the window and he's trying to get him to come inside, right? And he walks away. That's when Steven takes over for that time period.
Completely. 2 months
Yeah.
ago. So that's what we learned is that they've been references to it throughout the time of like until very recently I had it under control. We didn't know how recent that was, but it's been 2 months is what he says. Mark says that's when Mark kind of says like that's when when I lost control of you, you kind of took over, and that was like 2 months ago at my mom's like passing, the funeral.
Yeah. So I think that it gives us a lot more perspective on this, like and it's good to kind of show that sort of thing. Like I do really like that. I also one other detail that I wanted to touch on. Sorry to derail from the MCU news part because I know there
you're good.
is another thing, but the detail in Steven's bedroom, or Mark's bedroom, I should say, like his childhood one. There's a picture on his wall. It's the one-finned goldfish that his brother Randall was drawing before they left. That.
Yep.
So he kept that, and that's kind of a cool detail. And the use of mirrors when when Steven takes over for the first time. Mirrors have been used great in this entire show, and I really enjoy seeing it. I think that the director for this, he deserves an award of some sort for this.
Oh yeah. And the directors of episodes 2 and 4 are going to be directing Loki season 2, so they've they got the next gig lined up. That's supposed to start filming soon. John Watts is stepping down from Fantastic Four. Sounds like he needs a little bit of a break. Is what it's coming across as. This is not like the usual creative differences of. Like they didn't say creative difference. It is him stepping away for time off. They both say they want to work with each other again. Rumors are Marvel and Sony want him for Spider-Man 4 now, and that they're trying to get Zendaya back as well. So just an actual break. First when you hear like he exits Fantastic Four, you're like, oh great. Was there some sort of like, I want to do it this way, I want to do it that way? No, it doesn't seem like that. It seems like he's just like, I just finished 3 Spider-Man movies in between the time from Guardians 2 to Guardians 3. Okay, so he's had
between Doctor Strange 1 and 2.
Yes, he's done 3 movies in that time, and I'm sure No Way Home was a mess to deal with COVID, hiding everything secrecy for Toby and Andrew. Like it was probably a mess. So that's a big thing. I'm eager to see who will direct it next and kind of when that'll be announced. Maybe D23. I think that's later this year.
Yeah, like it's usually in June, D23, I think, right?
I think it's August now.
Oh, okay. Well, it's in the summer.
I think they push it to August because they usually do it with Star Wars Celebration in May. Actually, it's going to be September 9, 10, and 11.
Oh,
this year.
geez. Oh, wow. That's far. But
yeah, 131 days, 22 hours, 52 minutes, 20 seconds. That's what the timer says on the website.
See, I just want a good Fantastic Four movie. Because
Same. I like the 05 one, but yeah.
No, the 2015 one is the one that I'm talking about. That when I'm referring to, I want a good Fantastic Four. The first ones were fine.
Most people say they want a good one because 05 and 15 sucked. But yes, 15. I still haven't watched 15. Don't even know if I'm ever going to get around to it.
Not worth it. I'd say not worth it. I went to go see it in theaters too. I saw it on the second day it was out. What a mistake I made. It wasn't good. The actors didn't feel right for the characters. Yeah, just I wouldn't waste your time with it. You like the Fantastic Four, so it's better to preserve that image than to see the abomination that was the 2015 version. So yeah, you can save yourself that misery, I think.
Another delay, not MCU, but Spider-Man related. They pushed Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse from October to June of next year. June 2nd, 2023. It was originally Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse Part 1. It's now just Spider-Man Across the Universe. Part 2 is now called Spider-Man Beyond the Spider-Verse, set to release March of 2024. This was due to CGI animation stuff. This stuff is really tight right now with how they went with so long with not making anything, and now everything's in production. And of course, everything needs CGI. So it's kind of putting a little bit of a bottleneck on the industry. So yes, that's all of your news there. What's coming up on the podcast next week? Spider-Man. Next week, Moon Knight recap for the finale. I got Logan locked down. He suggested you come on too for that. So if our schedules align, that could be fun. But I know for sure next week I'm going to be talking with you about Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. So we will have you on talk about that. So Wednesday is the release of the finale. Then Thursday starts previews for Doctor Strange. So that's interesting. And while we wait for more MCU, the next thing is Miss Marvel in June. Maybe we'll get around to that Ant-Man comic review that we were going to have with you sometime there. I have a month to kind of mess around and do whatever I want with that, I guess. But it's exciting. Doctor Strange right around the corner. They just released a new little TV spot, so if you don't want any cameo spoilers, avoid that. But yeah, so guess what? We actually did hit an hour of a recap today. So people cannot complain about that. If you want to follow the podcast on Twitter, that is at TO Infinity Saga. Facebook.com/ wherever I have it stored on here. I'm trying to find it. / Infinity Saga Beyond. I don't know. Oh, here it is. Facebook.com/ Infinity Saga Beyond. There we go. Or you can email us marvelplusrecaps@gmail.com. Give us your feedback, and we will catch you next week talking double dose here. Moon Knight and Doctor Strange.